So, all right. So I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Hernan Maldonado, and I'm the Director of Student Services in the Lyles College of Engineering. And I'm very happy to see the great group that we have online participating in this great presentation that we have scheduled for all of you this afternoon. Um, we have a very special presenter, guest that's joining us today to lead this presentation. Mr. Brian Galicia, who works for Microsoft Corporation. He's the Senior Director of Strategic Global ISV Alliances, and I'm sure he'll tell us what that means in a little bit. But we wanted to offer this workshop at this time in early October because many of you are preparing for national conferences, whether you're part of SAIS, the Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers, or Society of Women Engineers, and also the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. All of you are having these, you have these huge national conferences coming up. And it's really important for all of us to learn the importance of having a strong LinkedIn profile and how companies use that. And so we wanted to be able to offer you this presentation and a workshop so we can all learn how to really leverage the power of LinkedIn. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Brian. Thank you once again for joining us, and happy to have you here, virtually in the Lyles College of Engineering at Fresno State.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks, Hernan. And thank you all to all the students joining and taking time out of your day on a Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope everyone's well under this really very weird, unique normal. It was a pleasure and opportunity to get this ability to speak with you because I have a personal passion on LinkedIn. I'm going to go through my background, etc. But what Hernan had mentioned, it's such a huge opportunity for each of you as students, especially those who are seniors, but even those who aren't seniors. When I talk with other students, even including ones from my university I went to, because I have done this similar speech to my university for the past 2 years, it always comes across as an opportunity where people realize, each of you as students, I'm sure you utilize TikTok, or maybe because of the whole thing, maybe you're not on it anymore, but I'm sure all of you are on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or some type of social media capability to kind of share your personal experience. This is going to be highlighting how you leverage LinkedIn to really establish a professional brand, because whether you will continue on your journey of more education, or you're going to get into the world of getting your first job, and I'm assuming most people, unless you have a big inheritance, want to have a full-time job and get paid, this is going to be the ability for you to kind of set yourself apart, because your education degree from such a great college only goes so far, because part of that is you're competing with other universities and college students who potentially are trying to go after the same job. And so this conversation for the 55 minutes we have together is hopefully going to be enlightening to the value of it and what you can do, and really some key call to actions. And if there's time, actually, if someone wants to be a brave volunteer, I'm happy to do real-time coaching on someone's profile and give you very specific tips in real time as to what things do managers or recruiters look for. I'm not a recruiter, but I do lead a team of 9 people. I have a global role. So I've been at Microsoft for 14 years, and I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of students, because I've also hired what we refer to as early in career students, or we have a program called MOC, which is Microsoft Academy of College Hires. We hire a lot of students from colleges like yourself to be enrolled and be a Microsoft employee. And so I can give you a personal point of view as well as a manager. What do I look for, and what do I do when I'm evaluating hiring someone? So you're going to see the agenda here. We'll talk about the importance of LinkedIn, building your professional brand, how do you get hired, and call to actions. And there's many different things that we'll go through. If you're open to it, well, you can also bookmark this. This is going to be at the end. I compiled this deck that I'm going through in that URL website that you see in the bottom left. And also, if you find this valuable, also either on any of your social handles, feel free to @mention me, or you just use the hashtag Fresno State, because it also gives me an indication that something was resonating that you actually enjoyed. And if you didn't enjoy it, that's fine too. I'd love the feedback, but hopefully you'll find value after the time we spend together. So again, thank you again, Hernan. If you aren't, and this is important, if you're not connected with him, because I was asking Hernan before we got started, how many people know him? I'm sure hopefully all of you know him as your Director of Student Services, but super important that as part of LinkedIn, and we're going to talk about this personalization, is that you want to connect with your peers. Like if you, I'm looking at all the people on this phone call, on this Zoom call, if you have your professors or peer students or even Hernan, great opportunity to connect with people because that's how you build your professional network and profile. Throughout my career, and I'm going to date myself because you're going to see kind of my background, I've been out of college for a while, but one of the things that has always served me well is having a broad and deep network with many people. And so you think about this opportunity I was exposed to, it was the network of Hernan getting a note from one of his peers who attended a conference for educators earlier this year that I presented at, very similar conversation where it gave me the opportunity to present to you fine students on this phone call. So what's been my journey? And again, I'm dating myself, but you can imagine if you rewind, and what the scary part is, I assume most of you probably were not born in 1996. You were probably born in 2000. That's what's scary is like, I always look at that because I got, when I did this presentation on campus, a few years ago, and I brought this up, someone made the joke saying, gosh, Brian, I wasn't even born in 1996. So if you flash back, I went to a liberal arts school in the Seattle area called the University of Puget Sound. And if you can believe it, back then, if we were in a pandemic, I don't know what we were kind of joking, but if we were thinking about, if we were in a pandemic in 1996, I have no idea how we do learning because we do not even have, we did not even have the capability to do a Zoom call or in our case, a Microsoft Team call. There was no capability or technology to even do that. So it's one of those interesting things is as my career evolved, when I graduated, I knew that so I graduated with a computer science business degree, slightly different than you as engineering students, but somewhat applicable because I had to take a lot of math classes. I had to take a whole bunch of classes that aligned to what I wanted to do. But at the end of the day, I did not want to be a coder. I didn't want to be someone sitting behind a desk just building applications for the fun of it. I did enjoy doing that, but what I more enjoyed is the ability to get in front of people and articulate value propositions and having conversations with people. So my career has spanned many different software companies in general, and some of them you may not recognize, but hopefully, of course, everyone recognizes Microsoft because we do so many things. And so it's been an amazing journey because I've been at Microsoft. I just passed my 14 years and I'll be going on my 15th year currently. So that's my family. I grew up in the Northwest. I actually grew up in Portland, Oregon. Have two amazing daughters, have an amazing wife who I met in school, and you could see our golden retriever. The other pictures you've seen are just have had many blessed opportunities to actually present different topics. And when you think about credibility on LinkedIn, I actually, people think I worked at LinkedIn. I actually didn't. But what I got an opportunity to do at a LinkedIn customer event a couple years ago in Las Vegas was to actually talk about how Microsoft sellers, because I was a sales leader at the time, how do Microsoft sellers utilize LinkedIn to advance a conversation and drive collaboration to sell? And you can see a picture, that was me actually last year presenting to students like yourself in person when we were actually in person, presenting a very similar conversation. And then of course, a couple years ago was an amazing experience. We have what's called the Circle of Excellence. It's essentially the 1% of our 10,000 plus Microsoft employees where we get this recognition, where we get an opportunity to meet with executives. And you can see I had the amazing opportunity to meet with Satya, who is our CEO of Microsoft. So my journey has been pretty broad and wide, but the big takeaway is that LinkedIn is such a foundational piece to it because that's how you build your professional network. So you think about what's happening today, and of course, all of you can appreciate this because you as students, it's even harder because competition for jobs is even higher because when you think about applying for a job at a company, you end up showing up with hundreds of other students, depending on when you apply for the job, trying to get that same job. Skills are so important because it's not just the soft skills that we all know and the engineering skills that you're developing, but another huge important thing is being able to leverage technology to advance the type of conversation and engagement. And so ongoing learning is so, so important. So even if you're going to graduate, my guidance to everyone is always take the opportunity to learn new things, because you're never going to stop learning. It's always this constant education journey, even if you're outside of school. And disruption. You can imagine no one predicted that this pandemic would happen. And you can imagine what's happening is that companies have found a way to do things in this new environment. Or even you think about a restaurant experience, or you think about retailers. You see a lot of retailers going out of business, but you also see a lot of retailers shining because they've been able to drive and pivot on different things to handle the disruption. So hopefully this is not the new norm. We're all sitting on this Zoom call today, but this is the experience that we have today, which is, depending on when you're going to graduate, and who knows, I'm crossing my fingers, hopefully in 2021, we have the ability to travel, get in front of face-to-face, have kind of big meetings, do all that stuff again, but who knows when that's going to happen. So how do you as students take advantage of this new norm, leveraging things like LinkedIn to help advance your professional network? The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pause at specific moments, because I can't see the IM string. So I'm going to pause in certain moments and ask Hernan to kind of, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to put it in the IM window. And also, if you want to, when I pause, if you want to come off mute, I'll definitely want this to be interactive so you can ask as many questions as possible. So when you think about places to jumpstart your career, you can imagine there are many other social networks for your personal life, which I'm sure many of you leverage or use. I would say, bar none, LinkedIn is for your professional life, because there's that fine balance where you're a student. So I always encourage, because I have a couple of nieces that are at university as well in North Carolina. I always encourage them, you have to have that personal experience, because that's the best part of being a student and being in college. But you also have to maintain that professional profile, because when you get a job, I guarantee one of the high propensities for people to do the initial legwork to determine, should I even talk to so-and-so, they're going to go into your LinkedIn profile and see your background. And if they see something in there that doesn't really say much about your ability to go do the job, not to say that doesn't give you an opportunity to apply for it, but what it does do is I talk about probabilities. For anyone who's taking statistics or et cetera, I'm always about, I can't guarantee anything in life, but what I can do is help you improve the probability to have higher impact and higher success. So the example I use, and I need to update this because this should include TikTok, but you think about if you're a student, or if you or a professional, you're trying to figure out, okay, what does donuts have to do with social media? What I wanted to articulate was, how do you think about social media as it relates to something as simple as donuts? So you think about Facebook and how you would amplify something about donuts on this type of social channel. You would like donuts. If you're on Snapchat, watch me eat a donut. You could probably say the same thing about TikTok. Instagram is, hey, here's a cool picture of a photo of me with a donut I'm eating. Pinterest, here's a donut recipe. Spotify, I'm listening to donuts. And then WhatsApp, anyone want a donut? So what do you think about looking at that? This is how you think about that translation. It may be cheesy, but I think this resonates really well. At least when I saw this, resonates really well, because these are the scenarios when you think about how would that apply to being on LinkedIn on the professional standpoint. These are points of views that show how that if donuts was a skill set, or donuts was something that you're really interested in, this hopefully gives you a point of view of that kind of perspective of what's the big difference between LinkedIn and other social handles and channels. Okay, so what can LinkedIn do for you as a student? One, it connects you to millions of professionals around the world, and I'm going to talk about the importance of alumni. It's so critical because people several years ago, or even maybe just a year ago, have taken the same journey. For any of you who are seniors on the phone, I guarantee there are people that were in the same spot you were, trying to figure out, where do I potentially even hunt for a job? It's such an amazing opportunity, and people don't realize this. And I always think about being very conscious of students who, money, sometimes it doesn't grow on trees and you're just starting your career. The type of things I'm going to show you, it's all free. There's nothing that I'm going to talk about that requires you to pay anything. There are things you can pay into LinkedIn to get more things, but the things that I'm going to talk about and articulate are all things you can do for free to drive the higher level of probability in your engagement with doing different things. Second is staying informed, because you can imagine, depending on what you want to do with your engineering degree, whether that be doing something, even working at Microsoft and working on things like Xbox or our Surface devices, because we do have, I looked at Fresno State alumni. There actually are Fresno State alumni from College of Engineering that do work at Microsoft. You may not have known that, but I'm going to show you how you can actually leverage that. But it's also the ability to stay informed. Besides connecting, it's staying on top of, if you want to work for Boeing or you want to work for, I don't know, whatever company is out there, the ability to stay informed on what's happening in the industry serves you well, because it gives you the opportunity when you're talking to a hiring manager to show, A, you care about that company, but you also have an advantage to other students because you're on top of what's top of mind for that hiring manager and the things that are impacting them for them hiring you potentially as someone that can help advance the conversation. And of course, there's many different job sites out there, but one of the best things is LinkedIn. Their premise when they first started the whole capabilities back in early 2000s was to not only create a professional network, was also get an opportunity for people to post jobs so that you can actually have the highest probability to find a job. Okay, so we talked about this. This number is probably much higher, but you can see these, when we talk about kind of the opportunities that it presents yourself, over 610, it's probably close to now 700 million, several million members that you can connect with. All these companies that are posting things or sharing things to get a point of view as to what are they talking about, what's top of mind for them. And then of course the schools and the education. When I was looking at Fresno State groups, similar to anyone who uses Facebook, I don't use Facebook to post pictures or anything like that. But what I do use it for is I actually participate in the Facebook groups on there because I belong to cars, because I'm a huge car person. Also love technology, so I'm part of different groups that talk about Microsoft stuff or phones or different types of things. LinkedIn has that same capability where you can actually join different groups related to Fresno State alumni or engineering things. That's where you also can find opportunities to get connected and find opportunities for what people are talking about. Okay, so I'm going to pause. This is a good, before I get into building your professional brand, I'm going to pause. And Hernan, were there any questions that may have come in through the IM window? Or I'll take a few questions if people want to ask a question live.
Nothing on the chat. Anybody have any questions? Yep.
Okay, thanks, Felice. I saw your head nod. No, that's good. Okay, good. So let's talk about your professional brand and what's going to get you noticed by your future boss and recruiters. So this is a statistic. Grant, I know this is a little older with 2015, but this still applies. Like I know so many people at Microsoft, and even me as a manager, I use LinkedIn all the time, because when I'm looking for not just hiring people, but I'm looking for, I've never met someone before. I always, first thing that is typically top of mind, if you ask any professional, the first thing that people will do is they're going to go on LinkedIn, type in the person's name and see what it says. And it's so important, because imagine going to a website, you're doing a research on a website for a company. Imagine if that company's website really wasn't hitting the mark on what you want to do. You get turned off, or you're like, you know what, first impression, never going to engage in that again. Same thing with your profile. Your LinkedIn profile is so important, because that is setting the tone for your professional experience of why does a company even want to potentially hire you. So what are the things that are going to get a recruiter's attention, or not just a recruiter, a manager? These are the 5 things that are must-haves, and I'm going to bounce into, after I finish a couple of these slides, I will bounce into LinkedIn specifically, show specific things in the LinkedIn profile. And any of you who are, of course, you're all online, you're all on your computer. If you have a multiple monitor, you can try to do it, follow along. But I'm going to show you very specific things you want to highlight and have in your LinkedIn profile to set yourself apart. And it's okay if you don't have any of things, because this is a learning opportunity. It's always an opportunity to get better. It's always an opportunity to get started. And even if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, this is the day I would say, if you're going to take anything away, if today you don't have a LinkedIn profile, spend the time today or over the weekend to create one, because it's going to set the tone, and you're going to find that it's going to be worth the time and investment, because it's going to set the tone for your professional experience. Okay, so what's the first one? One is education. So you want to be able to have the Fresno State education there, because you want to set the tone for recruiters to understand, A, what are you graduating with? If you have honors or whatever it is, you want to put that as well. But you want to put that as the foundation, because when recruiters are recruiting, you may not realize this, but there are filters behind the scenes that are looking for to say, show me all students in the California area graduating with an engineering degree in 2021. That is a filter that they can search for. And if your profile doesn't have the fact that you're graduating from Fresno State College of Engineering with that date, it makes it super hard for you to be found. And so you want to make sure your profile is building up, so when people are doing different filters and searches, you're maximizing the opportunity to get found. Because also, depending on, again, I don't know how companies go recruit into Fresno State, but I'm pretty confident that if you're like any other university, there are recruiters that go on site every year, not right now because of the pandemic, but there's recruiters that specifically work with people like Hernan and others to kind of figure out, okay, I'm going to have a career day or an opportunity to go find students for opening jobs. This is an opportunity where if the recruiter is leveraging LinkedIn, they're actually going to look for, hey, I'm going to be on the Fresno State campus. Who are students who are going to graduate this year with this specific skill set or this specific degree? And that's how you get found. Okay, second, super, super important. Sometimes this gets lost in translation, but your photo is so important, because you can imagine if you were going to go into a interview, would you show up with a t-shirt, a hat, etc.? It depends. Like I would say, maybe it depends on the company you're working for, but your professional photo is so important. And this does not mean you have to spend money to get a professional picture done. But what it does mean is that you should, all of you probably have really good cameras, and you probably have a friend that is who's really into photography, probably has a very high-end camera. Take the opportunity, ask your friend, either with your own camera, your mobile phone camera, because they're just as good, be kind of business casual, dressed up with a collared shirt, or business casual for women, and have someone take a headshot profile above the shoulders with just your face. It goes so far, because before people meet you, the first thing they're seeing is they're going to see your picture. And so what students typically make the mistake on is they take let's say a wedding picture, or they take a picture from a party and they crop themselves out and they put themselves in the professional picture. I would just encourage students to think about it a different way, because you kind of tell it's like, okay, I just kind of did the cheap way of getting a picture. It's as very simple as finding a neutral background, not just on campus, but just in your home. Find a neutral background that doesn't have anything behind it, potentially, and have your colleague or your roommate or someone just take a picture above you if you don't have one, and that's just as good with a neutral background. So you don't have to have a fancy photographer, because I'm not saying that you should spend money to do that. You're certainly open to that, but the best thing is just having that professional picture be taken, because recruiters, when they go look into your picture, it is kind of disappointing when they go to a profile and they don't see a picture of you, because then they have no idea. It's the human connection. They don't know who they're potentially going to engage with when they can't see that professional engagement. Experience. And so some people think, oh, Brian, well, I'm just a student. I don't have any experience. I always pause and say, well, did you have an internship? Maybe you worked at Target, or you worked at Starbucks, and they say, well, do I really want to put that there? I would say, yeah, because it shows that actually you've had a job, you've been successful at it, and it talks about customer service skills. There's a whole bunch of things you can leverage to show that you're just not a student. You actually have extended yourself, and let's say you are involved in a club, or you're doing something that shows experience. It's always those types of things to describe the outcomes. And you can see the bonus is describe. It's not just, hey, I worked here, but describe the outcome that you helped to drive. Like, even if it was at a retail store, you can say, hey, provided great customer service to customers coming into whatever. That's really good, because it shows that you have people skills, but also it shows that, hey, you were committed as a student to doing some type of job to show that you actually have some employment history. Volunteer experience. So for anyone who does, and not to say that you have to, but it always helps, because if you're doing any type of volunteer experience, whether it be Habitat for Humanity, maybe you work at a food bank, maybe you volunteer at your church. Those are all important things, because recruiters and even managers look at, what does this person do outside of school? What are the other things that's important to them? And if there's certain things that you're proud of, you should definitely list that there, because volunteer experience and things that you believe in really are important to employers and to hiring managers. And then, of course, skills. Again, I'm not an engineering student, so I can't even go into knowing what those skills mean or exist. But it's so important for you to, as you are taking all these amazing classes, and you think about looking at other people who've taken this journey with you, and you think about someone who's been in working at company XYZ with certain skill sets, look at other people you may know in the industry and see what skills are they putting there. And not to say that you should just put skills to say that you don't have them, but more a model the skills needed that are going to land you jobs in whatever type of engineering role. If that is going to be what type of job you want, model the skills that you're learning in class to reflect the skills that will show up to a recruiter or to a manager. Because as I mentioned, when recruiters are looking for talent, not only looking for, okay, people in a geography or people with a certain degree, people who are graduating from a certain college or university, but they also can say, I'm looking for this type of student graduating in 2021 with a skill set in mechanical engineering. And so if you put mechanical engineering as a skill, you're going to show up in a potential list. And even better, if you're engaging with your professors, and this is where, again, comes back to connection points and engaging with your professors, even peers, if you have other people in your university, or maybe you had an internship and it went really well, if you have those people that can endorse to say, yes, this person in electrical engineering has this, that makes a big difference, because it then reflects and can make up for the fact that you've never had a job specifically in what they're doing. But people observed you in doing that, either because they've seen you in class or you've gotten hands-on experience in some type of internship or something like that.
We have a question,
yeah,
Ryan,
great.
about Gerardo Lara Parra has a question. Would you put the same skills you have on your resume, or would you choose different ones?
No, so fair question. So when you think about your resume and you think about this, as a student, it kind of goes hand in hand. And so what I would say is you just want to be consistent, and what you would put on a resume as skills, yes, you can do the same thing. The one thing about LinkedIn compared to a resume is only going to go so far, because typically employers are going to scan it in, or if you type it in on a website, they'll do that filtering. But for recruiters, when they're going into LinkedIn and using the behind the scenes searching capabilities that they do, I would just say, when you think about skills, optimize your skills that are showing up on your resume or on LinkedIn to what is going to help you land a job. But the important thing is never be dishonest about your skills. Like if you don't have that skill, don't put it down just to show up in someone's search criteria. You should always be optimizing your skills based upon what you really have, but really look at skill sets that when you look at jobs that are posted, and I'll talk about this, when you look at jobs that are posted at any company, XYZ, you'll always find the job description, you'll see certain skills that they're looking for, especially probably with engineering students. So look at your experience and go, okay, I learned that skill. These are the types of skills that are required to even apply for this job, and match that so that your resume and your LinkedIn profile reflect those types of skills that would help you have a higher probability to be seen.
Neil has a interesting question here. Concern by adding dates on my work history will that shows my experience, but also my age. Could that lead to ageism?
That is a very gosh. I can go either way, because for me, if you notice, because I dated myself, I mentioned I graduated from '96, so you can do backwards math, unless I was a genius and went to school when I was 12 years old, which I didn't. I just, like normally, like everybody like you started going to college when you're around 18 or so, depending on if you decide to do something else and come back. But I leave that up to you. I personally have found that hopefully there is not age bias or age discrimination through that. I can't argue to say, will that happen or will that don't happen, but really companies that are on the up and up who utilize, don't look at age, but look at skill sets and experience. To me, that's how I think about it. Because when I look at people's LinkedIn profiles, I don't immediately try to do backwards math to go, okay, they graduated in 2000, and I can guess like, oh, they're probably this age. I never do that, because it doesn't matter. But if you're concerned with that, the thing you could do is just put the experience, but not put the date. But it's going to come back anyway, because usually when you're applying for a job, every company, at least most big companies, they all do a background check. And so even with that being said, they're always going to find what are the details in there, and whether you decide to disclose that during the background check or disclose that up front. Again, I don't have a personal point of view, other than I disclose the times of it, because for me, it's like, I hope that no one's discriminating me on the fact of what I've been doing, but it's more of showing the fact that, like, a good example is if I put my college graduation date in my LinkedIn profile, which I do, it gives an opportunity for other people who may connect with me. They may search to say, hey, who graduated in 1996? I immediately can find all my peers who I may know who are now in the workforce because of that search criteria. I'm not using it for determining age. I'm just using it for that specific time frame to say, hey, who has 20 plus years of experience who may have graduated from so-and-so. All great questions, guys. Thank you for putting it in there. And I'll take one more question and then continue moving on. Anything else, Hernan? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Does LinkedIn, should we update LinkedIn and resumes depending on where we're applying?
Yeah, I mean, so LinkedIn, it's tough because you can't change LinkedIn 20 different times because LinkedIn is LinkedIn. What I would say is that if you are trying to apply for multiple roles and trying to change it up slightly, I would, on the LinkedIn perspective, just try to align on something that's covering all the different things, unless it's like super way off. And that's where it gets challenging. I don't have a good recommendation for you. Because if you're applying for one job that really leverages electrical engineering or something type of engineering degree, and another one that has nothing to do with that, I would just say you have to optimize your LinkedIn profile to that's going to get a broad brush. A resume, that's where you can take it a little bit and tweak it a little bit. And I encourage people to do that because when you apply for a job, you are trying to optimize specifically for what that organization is specifically looking for, especially a cover letter, because you want to make it's personalization. But at the end of the day, when people go back to your LinkedIn profile, that LinkedIn profile shouldn't be changing every day because you might miss the fact that one job you applied for may not be optimized for one, and then all of a sudden you forgot to change it. Try to optimize your LinkedIn profile to be a broad brush, but use your resume as an opportunity to then tweak it a little bit based upon the types of companies that you might be applying for, is my point of view and recommendation. Okay, so let me just look at the time here. I think I have plenty of time. Yeah, so I have 25 minutes. So I want to get through some of these slides and then go to kind of some real-time stuff showing in LinkedIn specifically. So how do you get hired? So one, we know that there's so many things that are on your plate. And also in a pandemic, you're just trying to stay engaged when you're doing remote learning. And so knowing where to start is half the battle. So when I say that, it's one, and I'll go through this. This is so important. This is one of the things, if you're going to take it away from what I'm talking about here, one is your profile, but the second is all of you should be going to the Fresno State University page on LinkedIn. A lot of people don't know this, but this is free. There's an alumni area in here where you can do searches and filtering to see all the alumni at California State or Fresno State and try to filter out certain things based upon maybe you want to get a job. You don't care what it is, but some students have told me, Brian, I just want to live in Hawaii. I don't care what job I get. I just want to live in Hawaii. I'm like, great. Did you know you can actually go into the alumni tool here and search for who went to Fresno State University College of, or not even just College of Engineering, just who went to Fresno State in general, and they live in Hawaii. That's where you'd start to build your professional network. Or the example that I'll show is like, hey, where do they work? So I did find a couple of alumni that went to Fresno State University that work at Microsoft or whatever job. It doesn't matter. I'm not biasing your decision to work at Microsoft or not, but whatever company it is, you have the ability, there's various different searches you can look for. You can also search for what degree did they get. So if someone graduated with an engineering degree, you can then start to see all the alumni who graduated with an engineering degree and where do they work. That gives you an opportunity to understand, well, I don't know where I want to work, Brian, but I do know that I want to do something with my engineering degree. That gives you, again, some initial insight and opportunity that we'll get to. Okay, referrals are so important. This is why connections are critical. And so Hernan, I don't know how many connections he has, but imagine that if you were to leverage his network plus all the network of your professors and the network of all your peers, or even I would say your mom or dad, or your nieces or nephews, or any of your friends. The moment you start connecting with people, it starts to build your network. And the thing that always will help you is that if you were to apply for a job randomly at company XYZ and you just put your name in, that's challenging because, of course, companies of size, like especially at Microsoft, you're going through the engine of this big thing that's trying to analyze all these keywords. And if you didn't optimize it the right way, your resume would never be seen by anyone. Versus a referral, if you leverage someone who knew somebody at company XYZ, your opportunity, I'm not guaranteeing that will open the door, but it's a higher probability because those job referrals go so far because you can leverage someone that may know someone at a company to get in front of them to ask, hey, what's the best way for me to represent myself to potentially be considered for a role at whatever, company XYZ. And connecting with people is so important. And that's why personalization is so important. So when we talk about LinkedIn, you can't just connect with people with no context. You can imagine for me, I get, several connection requests every day because of what I do. And I'm a very visual, I'm always on LinkedIn on a consistent basis. People reach out and I have no idea who they are. And so it's so tough because I'm like, okay, what do I think about it? What do I do with it? It's so important that you send personalized invitations or anything you send out to people. You always want to personalize it, and it has to be professional. You don't want to make a bad impression with someone, and also always give context. And it starts with, as I mentioned, friends, family, classmates, mentors, teachers, professors, student advisors, and dean of students like Hernan is. Those are the types of things that you want to do because that helps you drive the connection points to start the process. And then, like I mentioned, tapping connections and alumni for help. So even if you don't know them, if you come across professionally and say, hey, I'm a student, just like you were, maybe whatever, if they decide to put their year or their graduation, but you can say, hey, I'm reaching out as a current student at Fresno State. I know you're an alumni. I would love to take an opportunity to pick your brain to get a conversation happening at company XYZ. Are you open to having a conversation soon? Most of the time, and students have done this at the university I went to, University of Puget Sound, when students do that, I always respond. Because I had a really good experience at my university, and it's always a way to pay it forward. So for me, when I see that, I'm more likely to respond versus and I've had students do this. Students just send me a connection request, but I don't know who they are, and it goes to the bottom of the funnel because I see so many of them and I don't know what the context is. But if you send that kind of, here's the background, here's why I want to connect, would you be open to it? I'm not guaranteeing that they'll respond, but there's a higher probability when you leverage the connections and the alumni and personalize it to get that outreach. And then, of course, it's probably obvious, but as you're looking for jobs, it's so important to go to LinkedIn, type in the company, whatever company it is, and you'll find that not only is it give culture stuff, job description, you'll find this stuff on the website, but it's so enlightening because LinkedIn does a little bit more, because not only does it give the freshest perspective, but it also shows you, if you start to build your network, it starts to show you who at that company you may know, or people in your network that might know people at company XYZ that you might want a job at. So that's why the importance of your profile, to connecting with people, personalization, then coming to this. Hopefully you start to see this coming full circle, because that's what's going to help you land jobs or get awareness to what's important. Because you look at things that are happening, because when you see jobs being posted on LinkedIn, it gives you some context as to how do I get a job there, because you know what that company's doing, what's top of mind for them, what are people talking about, but also can optimize your resume or LinkedIn profile to reflect how you can actually add value based on skill sets and capabilities to that specific company. Also, you can set up job alerts. So of course on LinkedIn, if you find that, hey, as you start building your opportunity where you need to find a job, using job alerts on LinkedIn to set up certain search criteria to say, if a job opens up in this area, in this not just state or country, with these types of skills, have it pop up on my lead so that it just gives you awareness to those types of things. That actually is useful, because then as you may not be ready to take on a job yet, but if you set this up, it gives you some insight into when you are ready to start applying, because you're getting closer to graduation. It gives you some information to just be on the radar as to what are companies looking for when you're trying to look for a specific job. Other things that are super important is you want to follow the company. So you may not know this, but when you're on LinkedIn and you type in company XYZ, there is a button there that says follow the company. Super relevant, because recruiters or even managers, I noticed that when someone is looking for a job at Microsoft, people that catch my attention are the people, when I go to their profile, it shows that they follow Microsoft, because then I know they're paying attention. And I also know that when they follow an influencer, so a good example would be if someone is following Satya, I would see that. But also for you, it's important because you may not report directly to the CEO of a company, but what you will understand is if you're following the influencers for that company or the industry you want to work in, it gives you really good feedback. So when you're in a job interview and someone asks you, hey, what's your point of view? You are well armed with, hey, I just noticed that the CEO of this company is doing this, and this is my perspective. Managers and recruiters love that because it shows that you're paying attention. It shows that you actually have a point of view. You have some relevancy to the conversation. And then industries, again, depending on, because you're all engineering students, there's certain industries that you want to potentially have a job in. What better than to follow the industries that you're going to potentially apply for jobs so you know what's being talked about. Of course, everything's being talked about as a pandemic or the election process or whatever it is, but it's super important to understand that because it gives you a point of view to just know what's relevant. So when if you do get an opportunity to have an interview conversation, it gives you a point of view to bring something up that's relevant to the topic. Last thing is I mentioned join relevant groups. So I just did a quick search. There are a ton of Fresno State groups, LinkedIn groups that you can see are the members. That's a great way to get connected with people you may not know, and you may come across someone that works at a company that you actually want to go for, or you can utilize this as an opportunity. I see this in my own University of Puget Sound alumni groups. People say, hey, I'm looking for a job. Can anyone help me? A whole bunch of alumni come in and say, oh, I have someone that can help you, or people are really willing to engage, and it's just a matter of finding the right people and the connections. And one of the ways is just utilizing LinkedIn groups to determine that. Okay, so I'm going to pause before I get to call to action. I'm going to jump over to real-time demoing a few stuff with the 15 minutes left, but I'll pause, Hernan. Any additional questions that may have come through?
We do have a question on the chat is, does it look bad to create a LinkedIn if you already have a job? Will the employer think that you're planning on leaving and maybe having an adverse effect like not promoting you?
Oh, no, not at all. Well, again, I can't speak for all employers, but I would say that doesn't reflect that you're looking for a job. Other than in LinkedIn, you may have noticed that there's a capability that says open to work or something like that. There's an option for, especially under a pandemic, and I'm sure some of you have seen it. If you look at people's pictures, if you're on LinkedIn, you may have noticed that on people's pictures, a little green banner shows up on the kind of the bottom left of the circle, says open to work. If you check that box, then yeah, that doesn't look very good because then your employer goes, oh, Hernan, why is Hernan looking for a job? Like, isn't he happy with working here? But on the flip side, if you just put your profile out there, yeah, I mean, in my opinion, employers shouldn't be frowning on that. What you could be doing is, and this is where my selling acumen comes in, because if you look at my profile, what I do is I'm amplifying the work we're doing. Like if any of you look at my LinkedIn profile currently, you're going to see a lot of the stuff I'm posting is all about certain things about the industry, certain things about independent software vendors, and I didn't talk about what I do. Maybe I should have, but I talk about things that are going to attract people to come to me. And part of that is talking about how, A, proud I am to work at Microsoft, 2, relevant things that I think are cool and fun. And you might notice that, again, some of you who are electronic engineering geeks like me, didn't get an engineering degree, but the fact that I love technology and phones, I actually have the Microsoft Surface Duo, and you probably can't see this on the screen, but it's the new phone that we created. And I actually did an unboxing experience on LinkedIn that got a lot of views, but it's using that as an opportunity to talk about how I think some things that people follow me are relevant. So to answer your question, I don't think it's going to hurt you. I think it's just an opportunity to expose things unless you specifically say, hey, recruiters, please contact me. And it shows up on your profile in a way that people, your employer can actually see that you're actually looking for a job. That is where you don't want to do that. Okay, anything else? I'll take one more question and then I'll go show some things in real time.
Any other questions? Turn on your mic, go ahead.
Where would you place research experience, just under experience in general?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think it was Dan answering the question. Yes, you could do it multiple ways. Let me just open up LinkedIn and I can show you a couple things with the 13 minutes we have left. So here's my profile. And for those of you who looked at it, of course, you're going to see a couple things. And I practice what I preach. One, so going back to your specific question, Dan, when you scroll down here, you could do it in a couple places. You can do it as skills, like if it's a specific thing you can call out, or the specific experience, that's where you can call it out into, like if it relates to a specific role you held, and you can put it in here. Those are a couple places. For those of you who are I know in engineering, I don't have a patent, but there's also different places you can put if you have patents or things that you've been recognized for. There's a lot of different places you can put in here, but a lot of it comes down to just the skills endorsement recommendations, but accomplishments. This is another place you can put it. Like for me, you can see I try to post publications or things where I've been asked to go do something, honors and awards or things like that. I'll leave it up to where the best placing, but what you described, Dan, is like there's multiple places to go. Like it could either be skills, it could be in the experience, or it could be just right here, accomplishments is places where you can put it.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Okay, so let's go and show a couple things. So one, it's super important. You can see here, when I look at a profile, you're gonna notice that it's kind of like a website. If you want people to engage, the one thing that's always going to come across is that they're not going to scroll down unless they choose to, like with any website. You're going to get attracted to potentially engage based upon what someone immediately sees. And you can see here, there's only a few things that show what I call above the fold. And for any of you who are kind of web page aficionados, what that means is that it's just something that immediately shows on the screen. You don't have to scroll up or down. And so you can see here, one, it's a professional picture. Two, there's a background here. And I encourage you as students, it's personalization. By default, LinkedIn doesn't give you anything. It gives you an opportunity to upload it. And students have asked me, Brian, what would I put there? One, you can put a picture of, like you can see my background for personalization. I'm not in front of your campus today, of course, but you can take a picture or use a stock picture of Fresno State's campus so that it's very clear you're graduating with a degree or you're currently at Fresno State College of Engineering. It gives a sense of a recruiter looking at going, oh, this person is currently at Fresno State. Or you can even go a level farther because you're all engineering students on the call. You put something that's relevant to engineering. Like if you want to build a truck and maybe you want to build a plane or maybe you want to build an Xbox or hardware devices, put something in there so that when the recruiter looks at this, they immediately come to a realization, this is a student who actually loves engineering. So, and even better, if you are in action, let's say you're at an engineering contest, or I know I've always seen on different shows where engineering students are competing with each other. If you're in action, like building a bridge and pretending the weight of a bridge and you're kind of seen in action, that's even just as good because it shows the ability for you to be articulating that value in front of people. The other thing is see at the top where mine's a personalized URL, and I'll show you where to do this. So important, unless you have a common name like Ray Smith or John Smith, unfortunately, it's probably already taken. But if you have not a common name, you may not have realized this, personalization is so important. And you want to grab this because when you have your resume, when you create presentations, or when you're in front of people, you probably notice at the very beginning of my presentation, and you'll see it at the end, I always put my LinkedIn profile there. And part of it is because it's my 24/7 site that people will just know, okay, what does Brian do? And they may not do anything to engage with me, but what it will do is it's attracting people to always come back and get a point of view because I always am posting things that I think are relevant. So where you change that is when you go into your profile and you click on your profile and you get to this point, there's going to be an option here that says edit public profile and URL. This is where you want to do a couple things. One is you're going to see edit your custom URL here. Make sure that you take and I always recommend for students, unless you have a common name that's already taken, just use first name, last name, and be consistent. Because if you have other handles like on Twitter and you utilize that or Instagram, where if you want to have that consistency of being seen on handles, use the same handle that you use in other profiles, but just make it professional. Don't put like kitty cat 96 because I don't own cats. I'm actually allergic to cats, but I know people are a big fan of cats and I've seen that on URLs. I'm like, I would not do that in a professional profile. I would do it just to say, okay, it's your first name, last name. If you have a common name, use your middle initial, your middle name, or something that says last name, first name, something to try to get that personalization. Second is LinkedIn, of course, for privacy and sensitivity reasons. They may not have the picture be set to public. This is not Facebook. This is not something you want to hide. Unless you're going into the Secret Service or you're doing something very hush-hush, I always encourage students to say you want to have your picture be seen because when someone's looking at your profile, they're not going to know you. You want your picture to be public. And I choose to have all these selections show. I'll leave that up to you, but I would encourage everything not to be hidden unless you're working for some super secret government agency. LinkedIn should be an opportunity for you to be public and be seen. Okay, so once you make, does someone have a question? Okay, so the other things in here, I know we're gonna run out of time. There's a couple more things I wanna show. I put in here, the headline should just not be something that's generic. You could actually say, because each of your students, something that says something about you're an engineering student, graduated in 2021, looking for the next opportunity to impact a firm, blah, blah, blah. Someone might say, Brian, why would I put that there? It's because if you're looking for a job, it immediately tells that recruiter, it flags them to say, oh, well, this person's an engineering student, graduated in 2021, and actually was looking for this type of thing. Without having to scroll down, it immediately tells them what they do. And you'll see that with mine is that I just don't put my title because no one will know what senior director means. But if I say something like empowering ISVs, and I know many of you may not know what the ISV term means, but the people in the industry, software industry knows what this means. When someone sees this, they immediately can gravitate towards going, oh, I should talk to this person potentially. That's what happens when they start to scroll down. So the other thing we talked about importance. The other thing that's super important, this is kind of like your cover letter, but this is where you can explain something a little bit about, hey, you're an engineering student at the Fresno State Lyles College of Engineering. You're graduating in this date. You can say, hey, what are the things that you offer? And say, if you're someone that's interested in having a conversation because I'm actually looking for a job, please contact me, blah, blah, blah. And for sensitivity reasons, I put my email here. I know that, of course, as students, you're like, ooh, what do I put here? Like, you want to be sensitive. You don't necessarily want to put your phone number here because you don't want random weird people calling you. You also want to put your address here because you don't want people showing up at your door. I was unconscious for students to not put that personal information out there. What we can do is put an email address because an email address is okay. Sometimes you'll get some weird mails, but you just kind of block them. But it gives an opportunity. You want to make it super simple for if a recruiter wants to reach out to you, my rule of thumb, even for students, is just have a call to action. Say, this is what you do, or this is what you're looking for, or this is what you can offer, then do this, which is very clear to say, if you're a recruiter and you like the background that I have, I'd love to talk to you. Here's how you get a hold of me. And maybe you have some other information and interest. And this is where featured and stuff, like if you've been publicized and externally, or you have something you want to highlight, take the opportunity to put as much personalization on here because that's what's going to attract recruiters and managers to you. And then, of course, skill sets and all this stuff, everything that's going to allow you to show up in searches is going to be really critical. Okay, I know I have 5 minutes left. I want to touch on this, and I'm going to wrap up with a few slides and then close out with any questions that people have. So if you go to the Cal State University Fresno alumni page, and I have this in the, I put a few really useful links in the resources that I'll remind people where that is. But when you go to the page, you click on alumni, here's a good example. There's 93,000 alumni that say on their LinkedIn profile that they went to the Fresno State. So here's a couple of examples. If you wanted to say, and again, I'm being biased here, not to say that you should work at Microsoft, but let's say you were interested in, any of you were working for Microsoft. What's going to show up here out of the 93,000, you can see here, now there's 50 alumni. That shows me here are all the, and I don't know any of these people, but you can see there are 50 alumni that went to Fresno State, maybe not the engineering college, 50 alumni that you can tap into to drive a conversation. The second thing is I'm going to go over here and go into what did they study? So I think I saw here it is. So I think this aligns to the Lyles College of Engineering, but there are two people, because I was doing this yesterday just to do a search for interest here. There are two people that went to the, and you can see here, mechanical engineering. I assume that falls into the realm of Lyles Engineering, Hernan, but if not, maybe bad example. But hopefully you get the idea. There are two people that graduated with an engineering degree that work at Microsoft. And not to say that Microsoft is a thing, you could see all these other ones. Like here, where are the other people that maybe graduated the engineering degree? Pacific Gas and Electric Company, Apple, Verizon, Boeing, Google, General Motors, Raytheon. Sky's the limit. This is where, if you're thinking about what companies or jobs to apply for, or the fact that you can see here, someone actually lives in Chile. So if you want to live in the country Chile in South America, what a great opportunity, or Washington, DC. You get the point. There's a lot of capabilities to go do that. And the most important thing is if you identify someone that you might want to reach out to, as I mentioned, not only having a professional profile, but super important that you send the personalization. So if you were to reach out to Sebastian or David, you can't just randomly send them a note with no context. You have to put in some of that valuable insight to say, hey, I'm a student. It looks like you graduated from Fresno State. I am super interested in working for company XYZ. Would you be open to, in the near future, having a phone conversation for me to better understand what you do and how I can get a job like what you do? It goes so far, because when I've done that for students, I've always gotten some messages back a couple of months later saying, gosh, Brian, that session that you just did worked. And I love hearing that, because this is type of stuff, granted, it's been a while for me because I didn't have this capability when I went to school. But if you set yourself up for success, even if you're not a senior on this phone call, you can still do this. Because I got that question a lot in other conversations is, oh, well, if I'm not a senior, would this apply? Yes, even if you're a freshman on the call, I don't think there's any freshmen, but you can set yourself up with this foundation to really help drive success. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation here. So call to action, update your profile, leverage the Fresno State alumni page that I mentioned, connect with peer faculty alumni. Not that I want to bombard Hernan, but if you're not connected with Hernan, you should. And if you know him, you should. But just make sure you don't just hit connect, you personalize it. So it actually says, hey, Hernan, thank you for setting this up. I'd love to be connected on LinkedIn. So it helps you and it helps him, because again, it's building this vibrant connection point of the connection, and personalization is key. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time. I know it's not easy on a Friday. There's a whole bunch of things that you could be doing. You could be outside, you could be hanging out with friends, you could be playing video games. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things you could have been doing than listening for an hour. I truly am grateful, appreciated. Hernan, thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to share this wisdom with all of you students. As I mentioned, this is the website that you can leverage. It has the deck I shared. So some of those wording of things are like, hey, Brian, I didn't get a chance to screenshot that. The deck is in there. Plus, I added a couple links that I think are valuable, and a shameless plug if people are interested in Microsoft. I put the career link for students who actually want to look at jobs there. And I also put a LinkedIn link, not for looking at jobs at LinkedIn specifically, but there's a LinkedIn page that actually goes through all this stuff as students and resources, say, how do I really optimize some of the stuff? Because I was just scratching the surface. If you want to learn more, I definitely put in links for other things. And I also put the link to the Fresno State alumni page on LinkedIn. So it's super simple for you to have all this information. So if you enjoyed the conversation, feel free to @mention me, maybe take post it in on any of your social channels, just @mention me, because I am on Twitter and LinkedIn, also on Instagram as well. Type in Fresno State hashtag, so I just know that, hey, you got something out of it. And thanks again. So I know we're at time, so anyone who needs to drop off, feel free to, but I will hang on the call for anyone who has any questions they may want to ask.
We do have a question, Brian. We've already placed our research experience in a different section, such as experience, can we still mention it in about section?
Oh yeah, I think that's really good, because repeating it, because someone may not get down, as you saw when I'm scrolling down, someone may not get down to the experience section, but they will see if they scroll down a little bit. When you go to the about section, there is an opportunity for you to say something. And if it's the research experience that goes to a specific page, you should highlight it. And you'll notice that if you go to my profile, there's certain things that I highlight multiple times, because I know that if someone is only going to go to the very top, they're only going to see the very top. So I'm trying to highlight the things that I think are the most relevant, that optimize. I'm not looking for a job, but more of, if someone doesn't scroll all the way down, what are the things that is going to get someone's attention to allow them to scroll down? But if they only had 2 seconds and they spent 2 seconds on my profile, always think about what are the most meaty things that you want that person, recruiter, hiring manager, to see. And of course, research projects are super important. And when they see that and it's up front in the about section, it adds a ton of value, because they'll see it pretty immediately if they scroll down a little bit to get that insight.
Any other questions? Anybody? Turn on your microphone, go ahead and ask.
Hey, Brian, I got a question. It kind of, I don't know if it just pertains to me, but like myself, I'm a combat veteran with a disability from service, and wondering, I know a lot of companies, whether they're subcontractors or the government, have to fill 7% of their hiring with disabilities, people with disabilities. And is that a selling point? And for some, it's not going to be, people don't want to deal with somebody that has a disability.
Yeah, and that's a good question, Neil. I'm not sure if you would need to say that you have a disability profile on LinkedIn, but what you should say on your LinkedIn profile, you should definitely, and thank you for your service, first off, you should definitely highlight the fact that you were in the military with, especially if you got an honorable discharge, you should highlight that. I'm going to pull up as an example as you're talking. There's someone I know who's also a military veteran. He doesn't have a disability, but he's a military veteran. Here's an example. You can see here, I think you can see it. He was in the Army. And so if I scroll down here, you can see right here, in his experience, U.S. Army Reserve. Super important because exactly, Neil, like your ability, not necessarily your disability, but more the fact that you're a military veteran, that helps you a lot because you're right. There is going to be, I wouldn't say a bias, but there is going to be, because we're always looking for diverse candidates. And when we think about military veterans, that is diversity, because we know how hard it is, to give years of service to our country, but also the stuff that you have to deal with, like just the management chain, and it shows responsibility, it shows accountability, all the stuff that you probably were experiencing. You can see exact same thing. And this is as an example of a profile, because he's someone I know who works at Microsoft, who posted a picture of him in the military. And I just when you said that, I'm like, oh, I didn't look at detailed profile, but you could see pretty clearly that he calls out the fact that he was a military veteran. And if I go down, scroll to below, yeah, I think that's all. Yeah, and he shows interest here. Yeah, and right here, Bronze Star, and he calls out the fact that his military service award. Because recruiters, they're not necessarily, I would say, looking for that. It depends. Like if they're trying to really get diverse candidates, they will look at people's profiles and go, okay, who has experience working, or who's been in the military? And that's a search criteria they might find, and your name, Neil, will pop up. Does that help?
Yeah, that helped. I know also that employers get a tax credit for hiring veterans and disabled veterans. So, is that I know in the past I've had people tell me, oh yeah, you want to talk about that during an interview, because that's a selling point, but is it really?
I don't have a point of view, Neil, to be honest, because I'm trying to think, gosh, would that be something, if you wanted to share that, again, it depends on the scenario. Like if you feel like that would be an advantage or a capability, especially if it's asked, because at the end of the day, we look for diverse candidates, but we also don't kind of say, gosh, our accommodations needed, because part of it is if you look at like basic requirements, not to say in your engineering degree, like if you have to lift 50 pounds and stuff like that, yeah, those are things that you probably want to disclose, because if you can't meet those, and again, not saying that fits you, but those are the types of things, if you look at that, if that doesn't really align or do anything, I think more of it is just if it comes up in the conversation, you can bring that up. You can just say, hey, one of the things that I served my country proudly, and these are the things that happened to me. But again, it depends. It's hard to say because it depends on the scenario. It depends on the question of the interviewee, what they're asking you, and is it relevant to the job? Because that's the biggest thing, is like, it's the relevancy of, irrespective of your disability or not, it's more of, does Neil have the experience to actually be successful in job XYZ? And if by chance comes up the fact that when they talk about your military background and history, the fact that you are disabled, whether or not that makes a difference in regards to doing something behind the scenes, I can't tell you that. But what I can say is that having a military background does help, because the fact that we are always look for diverse candidates, especially people, not just, of course, your military background, but race, ethnicity, all that stuff, of course, comes into play, because we want to always look at diverse candidates as we're hiring people, not just at Microsoft, but any company that I've really ever seen, is that it's such a big difference when we can have diversity of thought in conversation.
Also, on my LinkedIn account, like this semester, every semester, I'm part of the Student Veterans Organization, which is a club on campus, but it's also a 501c3.
Yeah.
And this semester, I'm the treasurer. Last semester, I was the vice president. The semester before that, I was the historian, and every semester we rotate. But by putting that vice president, you know, for last semester, and then this semester I'm the treasurer. Doesn't that look like a demotion?
No, I don't think so, Neil. It just shows that you're doing different things. I don't think it's a demotion. It's just more of different perspective. I mean, you could just keep it here because if you're still part of the Student Veterans Organization nonprofit, you could just denote the different roles you have or create a different role itself. So, I mean, for your specific, I'm assuming this is you, Neil. So
Yes.
yeah. So for you, like you either say if you switch roles, I don't view it as a demotion. It's just like, hey, you're taking on a different accountability and responsibility. Because titles in what you're doing right now, because you could see here, there are people that at one company, for example, if I left Microsoft and went to something else, my senior director level may just be a manager at company XYZ. That's not a demotion. It's just that how different companies perceive different experiences or different levels. And or if I left and went to a different company, from what I've been told, I'd actually be a VP at a different company. So to me, it doesn't matter. It's more the experience. It's more of the things that what we're looking for, at least me as a hiring manager, I'm just looking for, does this person have the credibility or the experience that's actually going to help drive the focus and experience that we're looking for to help drive the conversation. So and it's good because here's an example for everyone on the phone who, as I mentioned, whoever asked that other question, open to work. If you're currently employed, this is not what you want to have show up. And of course, you have to specifically set the connection point to say that's what you're doing. But in Neil's case, like, hey, if he's looking for a job, that's certainly open. But if you are currently employed, I would just say that's not something you'd want to have. And then, of course, just looking at yours, Neil, if you're open to it, again, critical thing that I would say, just a quick glance at your profile. One is just put a personalized background here as a starting point. And then if you're going to graduate, I think it's great to have treasurer at Fresno State, but you could consider saying, hey, graduating with a degree in 2021, whenever that is. And so that people know, hey, it's not just a treasurer, because someone might look at it as going, oh, you already have a job, versus, oh, you're currently a student that's going to graduate this year that is looking for jobs in blah. Even though it's obvious because you have the open to work scenario. So you could have recruiters being connected to you. And it's great because you're already connected with Hernan and also Brissa, who's, I think, the person who attended my session earlier this year. And it's good because you can see here very quickly, I'm like, oh, I'm already connected with the two people that you know. And that, hopefully you guys see that that's such a huge value point, because of course I had never met you before, Neil, but there's two people that know you through my connection network. That's the value of this. Hugely valuable.
Right.
Okay, I appreciate it.
I know that there's things like just yesterday I put everything on what's it called, where it was private and whatnot, only because there was an issue with somebody being malicious towards me, and I wanted to make all that stuff private, and my wife did the same with all of her social media stuff, and
yeah,
and so, you know, when something like that happens, that's, you know, probably not something that happens very often, but it ended up being an issue where it could hurt my prospects because of, you know, just past acquaintance that we don't get along anymore.
Yeah, one of the things you could do, Neil, is that you actually can block people. So similar to other social platforms, you actually can say, hey, let me block this person, so that there's no ability for that person to see your stuff, but engage with you, send anything out. So that's also another consideration as well, is that if you get unwanted outreach from people, just like with other social tools, just block them.
All right.
Great. Anything else, guys? So again, happy to continue the conversation. If there's questions, because this is really for your use. I hope it's great to see there are people still on, because I know it's past an hour, so that tells me, okay, there must be something value here that I'm sharing, and people asking good questions. So any other things top of mind?
I actually have a question. I noticed that there's an education section where I actually put Fresno State University, but I was wondering if because I have study abroad experience, if I should put that university, even if I didn't graduate from there or anything.
So if you didn't graduate from a certain university, yeah, I wouldn't put that there. The whole thing about like you could, because you probably heard stories in the news, etc., where people get in big trouble where they say, oh, I went to Harvard or have a Rhodes scholarship, or I don't know, it doesn't matter, but always be very honest and transparent of anything you put there. So in the education section, that's a good example. If you did not get a degree or you didn't go have something at a specific college or university, I wouldn't put that there. If you did study abroad that had association or affiliation to that, I can't remember if the options for education, you could just say study abroad, but I would not say you got, for example, I'm still on Neil's profile, but Bachelor of Engineering or Associate of Arts, because when you get to a process of background checks, people look at that. Like people like, oh, they're not going to find that out. They are very scrutinized, because of course I've been through this multiple times as a hiring manager. I don't do the personal background checks. We have an organization that does that scrutiny. There are times where I actually have not had ability to hire people because something came back they didn't disclose, or they said something, hey, Brian, like they put this on their thing, but it does not show that they did this. And those are the types of things that you definitely don't want to have. And so for what your example you're mentioning, Alyssa, just if you didn't get that education, don't put it there. If it was something study abroad, put it in the experience or something else, because education is really, did you get a degree or did you study there? Like you may put an open-ended saying, hey, you studied this and this, but you didn't get a degree. You can do that if you think it's going to be valuable and helpful, but only put things, of course, across your profile that you can immediately confirm to say that you did, as well as endorsements and skills, because as I mentioned, certain things like, again, it's great to see Neil has a skill set in arc welding, because I'll use an example. If a recruiter was looking for an engineering person with an engineering background where arc welding was a skill, guess whose name would show up? Him. Neil's name, as they showed in the profile, would show up that way. And those are the types of things you want to have. Things like if they're soft skills or technical skills or very engineering specific skills. I can't tell you the engineering side, but you look at my profile, there's a lot of things about software, cloud computing, SaaS, CRM, and I might be throwing out terms that no one knows, but I guarantee that I'm not saying I'm leaving my job, but if there's any time where someone was looking for someone with those skill sets, I'm always going to show up higher on their scale of people searching, because those are skill sets that are on demand for the type of job that I have.
So I have a question, like kind of to follow with education. Would
Yeah.
you recommend us including the high school that we graduated, or should we just not include it and just include like college and like community college?
Yeah, I would say, because I have seen students put their high school degree. If you think that's valuable, great. I would just say, as a business professional, no one really looks at high school, to be honest, to be transparent. I mean, sometimes it'll come up to say, oh, do you have a high school degree? If that's and I only say that if the job requirement says, for example, you need to have a high school degree and a 4-year education, then that becomes valuable. But in most cases, again, it's hard for me to articulate that in the jobs that might come up for engineering. But for me, my opinion is you should only indicate the education of your Fresno State.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Good question. I appreciate you asking.
As you notice, I put in there 2021 because I graduate next semester.
Yeah, no, it's great. No, it's great. That's fantastic, Neil. Okay, I'll leave it up. One more question. If there are any last minute questions, I'll let everyone finish out their Friday. So anyone have wants to ask the last question of the day? Okay.
Thank you, Brian. I want to thank you on behalf of the Lyles College of Engineering, Fresno State. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for, doing this wonderful presentation for all of us. Great information for all of you and for all of us. I know I'm going to go and update my LinkedIn as well. It's been a while since I've actually touched it. So, but I do want to reiterate what you said about the alumni group, because I have found and connected with people, from alumni from the Lyles College of Engineering through the Fresno State alumni page there on LinkedIn. And so now, I have over 2,100, I believe, connections. Most of them are alumni of Fresno State of the Lyles College of Engineering. So very, very useful. Thank you for all your suggestions. Thank you for all the, all the work that you put into this presentation. I appreciate it very much.
No worries, everybody. Have a great Friday. Good luck in your degrees, and stay safe, be well. And thanks again, Hernan and Fresno State.
Thank you. Have a great
Take care.
weekend. Thank
You
you,
too.
everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.